So hello there and welcome to our Q&A on a framework for responsible AI in social media and how an enhanced data governance would help to give a boost to the proposed UK online safety bill, which is currently working its way through the committee stages in the UK Parliament. I'm Samantha Mitchell. I'm a technology lawyer and external affairs consultant, and I'm joined today by Shweta Singh, Assistant Professor in Information Systems and Management at the Warwick Business School, who, along with others in the Cyber Systems and Research Group at Warwick University, have been looking at different forms of AI. So before we start, Shweta, would you just like to say a few words about you and what you do?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks so much, Samantha, for having me and discussing with me the online safety bill and how we are building the responsible AI to tackle the challenges. So my name is Shweta Singh, and I'm an assistant professor of information systems and management at the Warwick Business School. I'm also an AI researcher at the Alan Turing Institute in London. And my primary research interest lies in designing and developing the next generation artificial intelligence. In other words, trying to find solutions to the major issues the current AI is facing. These include how to make AI bias-free, to make AI explainable, and to work and strive towards designing responsible AI.
Thanks so much. Shall we get straight into it and the Q&A? So when we've been talking about the bill before, you've said you're interested in exploring the online harms generated by social media. So to kick off, what is it that concerns you most, and what is it that you're looking at more specifically?
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks, first of all, for asking me. This is a very interesting question. So basically, the online safety bill itself is an interesting piece of legislation, as we are concerned about tackling content which is harmful, though could be legal. So the question becomes, what is that content? How to identify it? How to tag it? Especially given the fact that we are talking about the massive data generated every single second. So there is a very fine balance, or in some senses a thin line we want to draw, that without violating the fundamental human rights of freedom of speech or freedom of expression, we want to tag this harmful content. The question is how. So this fascinates me, how to design technology, or for that matter, responsible AI, which can do that. In the first instance, if we focus on the most vulnerable population, which uses social media, these are the underage users. And here, as a society, we have a responsibility to protect and safeguard our children, which also very well aligns with what Ofcom recommends, which basically means content moderation, user profiling, behavior identification, and so on. So the reason is that while designing this prototype of a responsible AI, we want to focus on this user group, and in particular, the harms which impact this user group most. And these include cyberbullying, anorexia, self-harm, profanity, or hate speech. So that basically is the motivation which drives me towards exploring this topic.
Yeah, so I mean, this is what the bill is designed to do, isn't it? And it's complex because for the first time, it will impose a legal obligation or a duty of care onto big technology providers and search engines such as Facebook, Google, Twitter, WhatsApp, and TikTok. And it's going to force them to carry out risk assessments or remove harmful content, as well as to take steps to mitigate against harmful content. And that is to say content that is likely to have a significant adverse physical or psychological impact on an ordinary adult or child. And it's the category 1 providers, which are really the biggest or most well-known tech companies, who will have to balance what they do against a duty to protect content that is also of democratic importance. So, given this fine balancing, let's go on to talk then about TikTok, because I believe this is the social media in particular that you want to focus on. So what I'd like to know is, what is it that interests you more about TikTok as opposed to other social media? And what are the specific tech issues you're going to look at?
Sure, absolutely. So TikTok to me, Samantha, is very unique and interesting social media platform compared to all its competitors such as Instagram, Facebook, etc. And the reason being, it uses a secret algorithm which facilitates it to understand the deepest intricacies of user behavior without asking any personal information, but just by looking at the amount of time somebody spends on a video. So thus, without asking any personal information, it is capable to understand your deep emotions, interest, and drive more content towards you, which you will like, enjoy. So in some senses, it is actually pushing you towards these rabbit holes, and it's capable to learn your vulnerabilities faster than any other social media platform. That's the exciting bit. So on one hand, it is capable to push this interesting content. It influences you without asking any personal information, but at the same time, it also creates risk, especially for those who are underage, as it's actually exploiting human vulnerabilities. So if you don't know, for instance, which direction the algorithm may drive you, it might even drive you to the wrong direction. If you really don't know the difference between what is right, you're not mature enough, you don't know what is right, what is wrong, right? So take, for instance, a very interesting example. So somebody is suffering from, let's say, depression or anxiety, goes to TikTok, and again, due to its secret algorithm, served more videos related to depression. I don't know, that's beneficial to the user's mental health, right? So the question basically becomes how to protect young users from being exploited by these platforms. The thing what we are doing is we are not actually going to crack the secret code of the TikTok, right? We are just going to moderate the content, which will then impact the recommendations the platform is going to. So that's our overarching idea.
Great, thank you. Yes, I mean, this is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the difficulties of defining online harm, because as you've mentioned, arguably we already have a pretty good idea of what is usually thought of as illegal and harmful content, which include things like fraud, scams, racial discrimination, and hate speech. But where things get a lot more tricky is when we're trying to identify content that can be both legal but harmful. And the difficulties arise because a subject that is seemingly innocuous may, depending on how a technology or algorithm works, how sticky it is, tip over into content that is instead something far more sinister. And this has certainly been identified in cases of misogyny, nudifying women, and child pornography. And I think this is also what you mean by a content rabbit hole.
Yep.
So looking at tech then to defeat tech, a further focus of your research, Shweta, is on developing a responsible AI model. And from the conversations we've had, I'd be really interested to hear more. So could you expand on this for me, please?
Sure, absolutely. So what we are doing in the lab is something very, very interesting, very unique, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it. So what we are saying is that what's the best possible way to design technology, and in particular artificial intelligence, which can do content moderation without violating the freedom of expression or freedom of speech. So a simple way to understand is that if suppose there were a human moderator who understands each and every message, each and every piece of information that flows around in the social media, he or she can actually tag the content in a particular context. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of a thing because there is a massive amount of data which the human moderator, which the technology basically generates every single second that's float around on the social media platform. So what we want is that we want a technology which behaves like human, who can actually understand the meaning of information, meaning of messages, which are embedded in its context, right? So then what exactly are we doing? So what we are saying is that if that were the case, how to actually go about designing that responsible AI, right? So to start with, we are using transformer-based models, and in particular, the bidirectional encoder representation from transformers, which is called BERT, which is developed by Google, and right now it is even used in Google search engine. So the way BERT is designed is that it actually learns the contextual embedding of words. However, what it still misses is a deep layer of knowledge, awareness, which we need to tag this harmful but legal content. So what we are doing in our lab is infusing BERT with a knowledge layer to understand what exactly is this harmful but legal content.
That's so impressive, Shweta. I'm just fascinated to hear you talk about how this model is developing. But just again, coming back to and to comment on the bill, it's simply not possible, is it, to legislate for every online harm? So just how do you provide guidance? And the bill tries to list different types of harm in a schedule, but there's also political debate brewing over what should be the precise process steps for big tech to take to mitigate against online harm. And as part of this, a democratic and evidence-led process. And this would necessarily mean input from academics such as yourself and from wider civil society. And in that way, you would help to assess the risks of existing harms and whether they should remain in scope, as well as in identifying future harms. I think that where we want to get to is an understanding that just as technology can amplify harm, so too can technology be used to mitigate the risks of spreading harm. So our challenge is probably less of a technological one and more of a governance problem, and for an iterative process. So I think the work you're doing, Shweta, just demonstrates why it's so important big tech providers become transparent about their AI, so that we can all gain a better understanding of what the impacts and outcomes are when we're using these technologies, and especially for children. So it's probably just worth mentioning too that while the online safety bill is currently being debated by the UK Parliament, the Digital Services Act is also working its way through the EU institutions. So a big question from a legal perspective is whether these two pieces of legislation are going to be developing in lockstep or whether they will diverge. So before we end, Shweta, perhaps you would like to say a last word or two?
Absolutely, absolutely. To be honest with you, Samantha, I'm so excited to design and develop this responsible AI technology, which can understand the legal but harmful content. I'm so passionate about this work. It is so close to my heart. The reason is it promises to safeguard our children and gives me the satisfaction that I'm doing something for the society, something for the greater good, something for our kids. And I don't think so there is anything more gratifying than this. So thank you so much for asking me, and thank you so much for having me here.
So it's a brilliant note to end on. And thank you again for your insights, Shweta. I'm sure we're going to be watching this area very closely as it develops. Thank you to you, everyone out there listening. And if you'd like to hear more, please do get in touch.
Thank you.